Fishing trips anywhere, anytime. FishingBooker.com. Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Hey, what's up, happy people? This is Robert Arrington from Deer Meat for Dinner. If you're into bow fishing like I am, you need to check out Cajun Bow Fishing. I've been using their gear for years, from the Sucker Punch Pro to the Winch Pro Reel. It's tough, it's reliable, and it works. Whether you're just getting started or you're ready to take the step to the next level, head over to CajunBowfishing.com and check out everything Cajun Bow Fishing has to offer. I trust their gear because it works. So if you're hitting the water soon, make sure you're rigged up with Cajun Bow Fishing. You will not regret it.
All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass podcast with Jason and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about family preparedness, getting everybody on board and hopefully not terrified when things get stressful. So, Jason, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little background here.
Sure thing, Chuck. Thank you so much for having me on today. So I'm Jason, and I spent the first half of my adult life in martial arts field. I ran a school for about a decade. I worked a little bit as a bodyguard, a little bit as a bouncer. And then I had kids, and I realized how little of that training and experience prepared me for protecting small, helpless creatures that I was responsible for. And because I had good coaches, I had learned at that point that when you find out something you're ignorant about, what you do is you go find people who know, and you just wring them dry of information. And that project eventually became Safest Family on the Block, which is my show, which you're on the next season of. And that's where I grabbed everybody I could, from a prepping expert to cops talking about crime prevention to nutritionists, suicide counselors, dog trainers, anybody I could find who could help me and my audience learn about protecting our families. And actually just last Tuesday, the book came out, Safest Family on the Block, 101 Tips, Tricks, Habits, and Hacks. And it's divided into 10 chapters by category. You know, we've got a crime prevention chapter, we've got a accident and fire response chapter, and we've got a emergency preparation chapter. Nice. And I figured we could chat a little bit about one of the biggest concerns a lot of people who are interested in preparing for emergencies, which is getting the family on board, getting your spouse on board especially, and getting your kids involved without scaring the crap out of them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think, well, one, where are people finding your book? I mean, I guess that's more of a wrap-up question, but where are they getting it?
So it's the usual suspects.
Everywhere.
Right? You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble. I'm going to give a quick plug, though, for a bookstore that they're not paying me or anything, but I just love their mission. It's called bookshop.org. And you go to bookshop.org and you can buy your book just like Amazon. You know, it takes a couple more days to get there. You maybe pay a couple more bucks for the book. But when you set up your account, you choose a bookstore, like a local independent bookshop near you, or one you're fond of from the town you grew up in, whatever. They've got hundreds nationwide. And whenever you buy a book, that bookstore gets paid as though you had walked into that bookstore and bought the book from them.
Nice.
So, I'm a huge fan of their mission. And so if you want to buy my book, buy it from bookshop.org. But, you know, we're also on Amazon. We're in Barnes & Noble. We've got a lot of orders from local libraries, local bookshops. So you can find it lots of places.
All right. I'll put it in the show notes, the bookshop.org. Cool. But anyway, that's awesome. So one of the biggest things, I think, is the family. People, it can cause a lot of tension in families because especially like a younger family, when you're just getting started, obviously money can be tight and tough to prioritize. And telling somebody, hey, we need to keep $300 emergency cash somewhere, you know, when we don't have money for groceries, what are we going to or buy some extra food. Well, we don't have money for that. That can create tension in the family. Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things is people are I just don't want stress and tension, and they tend to ignore things and, just go slow. So how do you work with that? How do you deal with that?
So that's a really good question. And I think the biggest issue is one of perception about preparation, right? Where if you're not a part of the community, and often if we are a part of the community, there's this perception, like I think with most things, most hobbies, most interests, where the general public kind of hears about the extreme versions, right? Mm-hmm. Where you talk emergency preparation to somebody, they immediately think that you want to move out to the woods, build a bunker, rack up a whole bunch of guns, and be ready for the zombie apocalypse. They don't understand that, preparation is also for when the car breaks down.
Right.
Or having a fire plan. Or something as simple as you mentioned about having the bit of emergency cash. Preparation is preparing your finances for when the car breaks down. And so most spouses will get on board with having an emergency fund in the bank. So it's not that hard to make that an emergency fund in $20 bills in the safe or the hiding of the house. And that's that's your gateway drug.
Right. No, I think that's fair.
The big thing, you don't talk about the big, crazy end of the world as we know it, shit hits the fan scenario, but the scenarios that are more likely that your spouse is probably already given some thought to.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, I like that. And that's the thing, like you said, you're thrown by, again, I'm talking about the younger, tighter extreme, and I think most people were there in their 20s or whatever, where a $200 bill or a flat tire or a car battery is the end of the world. Now a little older, things are a little more squared away. My set aside is a little bigger than $300, but it's, you start somewhere, but we all have like a minimum of where you need to be.
Yeah. And, that's even when you're really tight, you can probably find $5 a week. And, $5 a week in the mason jar, in the freezer or whatever, there's 50 weeks in a year. End of the year, you got $250 saved up for what have you. And it's a start, or you take, you go to the grocery store in the week and you find out which canned goods are on sale that week and you throw an extra $5 in. And at the end of the year, you've got a reasonable supply.
Right.
It's not, it's not ideal, but it's better than nothing.
I think that's it. It doesn't have to be a day one kind of, all right, we have the extra food, extra money, whatever. It's something you work towards, right?
Yeah, there's this thing about, I picked this up from a fellow named Dave Kovar. It's funny because I asked him for permission to use it. He doesn't remember having said it. It was just this pop-off thing he gave at this speech at a conference. But about how people tend to set their short-term goals too high and their long-term goals too low. Because what happens with a lot of interest, you see this with, if you ever worked at a gym, they come in on January 2nd and they just blow themselves out. Right. Because they want to learn, they want to lose 4 pounds a week.
Yeah.
Which you can do for a couple of weeks, but it's not sustainable. You start thinking about prepping and you start setting up all these plans in your head and you run out of money and you run out of steam. And then we all kind of fail at those goals because we've set a short-term goal so high that we can't make it happen. And then what we do is lose track of the incredible power of small, consistent increments. Rather than trying to get $250 in the in your hidey hole in your safe, and 6 weeks of food, and enough ammunition for your firearms, and all of that as a New Year's project is not going to happen. But 5 is absolutely manageable.
Right.
And over a year, that's a lot.
That's it. Yeah. No, I think, and that's like, you even see things like, I'm a big fan of like maybe the old school self-help stuff, Robert Kiyosaki and, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich type stuff. And, that's the thing. They keep pushing that, there's some story, I think, from Think and Grow Rich where he's like, if I decided to throw a pebble into the stream every day and whatever, I'm not going to just not do it. But baby steps and things like build up, over time. And it can be easy if you get into the habit. And like you said, if you just drop $5 in the jar every week or whatever, over time, that becomes something. Maybe it's $20 in the modern world, I guess. But
yeah. And it becomes a more palatable thing if you have a spouse who's not on board. And often they will become on board when they see it, especially once you've got $200 in the savings account or $200 in the house, and you need a new tire for the car, and you just kind of pop it out, and they see preparation at work. And again, that really underscores that thing that we're not really talking about the zombie apocalypse now. You can be prepared for that if you want. Do you remember 12 years ago when FEMA had the emergency preparedness advice page based on the zombie apocalypse?
Yes. Yeah.
It was hilarious.
Yeah.
It was accurate. But what you realize is that, you're set up for that.
Right.
But that means you're super duper set up for those smaller things. I often like to kind of draw the metaphor about, I mentioned my martial arts background, and, the martial arts Taekwondo, they have all these beautiful kicks to the head, and they get a lot of feedback about, but you never want to kick somebody in the head if you're actually defending yourself. That's crazy.
Feel like you're exposing yourself a little bit.
Yeah. But neither do they. What they do, what that's about is, if you can deliver a solid kick to the head, you can absolutely ruin somebody's kneecap.
That's fair, right?
And it's the same thing, that if we are actually reasonably prepared for, a 6-month bug-in situation, or even a month and a half after a serious snowstorm, because we live out there and it takes a while to restore services.
Yeah.
Then the 2-day blackout or the car breakdown
is easy.
Is cake. Yeah.
Right. No, I like that a lot. And that's so. And any other, before we kind of move on to the kids and like that, like other stuff with the spouse, any other big getting them on board things, or it's just a slow process?
That's tricky, right? And I'm lucky enough that my wife was on board from day one. She has a family history where they're all okay with that kind of thing. Nice. But some of the other things is just overcoming that stigma, I think, is the biggest one.
Yeah.
You mentioned finances are a pushback, but also I think we can admit that there are some folks in the community who they're a little out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We that's not wrong. My wife's big into planting and gardening and that, and it was easy. I mean, she was pretty big on preparedness in general, but also building on those things that are there. You like growing flowers? Well, cool. How about if we grow flowers and a little bit of more? I mean, she was already on board with it, but I think building on those things is definitely
that's huge.
A big key. Go with the strengths. If you have a little in, then
I forgot to mention that. That's such a good thought. The idea of a lot of people who aren't necessarily up for stocking your food and your water and stuff, they're still happy to plant a garden. And if that flower garden, you can just start, well, how about these medicinal species? Yeah. And then it's not far to go from gardening, especially if you live in an area where your garden overproduces, into preserving.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they're in it before they know they're in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's maybe a key if you can kind of focus on the strengths, I guess, build on the little bits that you've already got. Yeah. Oh, hey, they're having a sale and this is great. Let's just buy a couple extra of these because we all love those, and whatever, and kind of go as it goes. But
Christopher says that his gal got him a year's supply to Battle Box because she wanted to help. So
hey, that's stuff that's the end.
Start, and then you go from there.
Yeah.
I think there's also, and this is, in my experience, this is mostly a man problem, but I think if you're a woman listening, there's issues there too, where sometimes as men, we can get kind of condescending with our gals about self-defense and safety topics. And that is a really quick way for a lot of women to get them less interested in being involved.
Yes. And that's the thing is learning how to approach that. And I think we all kind of slowly get better as we get older. I don't know a lot of guys who start out at 20 and 25, when you're in that young relationship of, let's just, let me show you how to do this, and also, people are used to dealing with their dad or whatever growing up. And I don't need that in my life of somebody, coming in and dominating. And, I think really focusing on the strengths and building with that, I think is awesome. And I think that's where a lot of that tension comes from. If you let them come up with the ideas, you always see one of the big things I see in the relationship advice stuff lately is, women they don't want a solution maybe as much as they want you to hear them. And I think both parts are relevant, right? They do want the solution, but you need to find that way to transition, hey, I get where you're going. This is pretty tough and I understand it. And that guy is a jerk, or that lady shouldn't have done that to you, or whatever. Let's just never leave the house again, and then everything will be better. That's my plan.
Yeah. I have found when it comes to that kind of stuff, the phrase, man, that sucks. I'm sorry, honey. Works really well. I just say that and shut up.
That's it. Yeah. I do know, I've been slowly, the wife more and more into the whole prepper world over time. Like I said, she's huge on growing and storing food and all that was all good, early on. But so we went to prepper camp, which of course was in Western North Carolina, literally the day the hurricane hit Helene here, this last one. And so it was kind of weird because we were in a better part of North Carolina after the hurricane, and it was supposed to be all gone by this Friday at noon or something. And so we roll into the disaster area that day. And of course it's still raining and wet and horrible. And she's like, this is not what I'm looking for. So maybe being a little more considerate and thinking I could have played that one a little bit better, but I don't think she's going back to prepper camp this year. So,
well, one thing to think about in terms of this kind of stuff is also all of our hobbies. There's, if you're not with somebody who is also equally a nerd about that hobby, you got to balance stuff. If you're into football, maybe don't spend $1,000 on Super Bowl tickets and take her to the after party. Right. Right. If you're, if my other hobby is a tabletop role playing game, Dungeons and Dragons and such, and if I'm into that, maybe don't bring her into the deep end with Warhammer and spend $800 and a day and a half moving little men on a pool table. Meet them where they are, and then find, like you said, with the gardening and such, or whatever it is, find the point that they're already interested in. Yeah. And then break them in.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, like you said, one of the other things, is what about the kids? How do you ease them into that world? Because it can be traumatic when something scary happens, even just the power out with younger children.
Yeah. And I think there's two really important things here from what I've experienced and what I've seen, and from the conversations I've had with child psychologists on my show. And the first thing is that there's this sense that a lot of parents have that, well, I talked to my kid about how to manage this scary thing, but I don't want to put the seed of this scary thing in their mind.
Right.
And frighten them. And the thing is that, generally speaking, if they're old enough to understand what you have to say about it, they've already thought of it. They've already been exposed to the idea. And, between the internet and the TV and their friends, they already know that they might get abducted. They already know that they could fall off their bike. They already know that power outages and house fires happen. And so what would you rather have for your kid? That they're sitting there knowing these things are going to happen, having no idea what to do about it, having no idea if you're on the case.
Yeah.
Or to have mom and dad sit down with them and say, hey, this is a bad thing that can happen. It's very rare. But if that happens, here's what we're going to do about it.
Nice.
And then the other part that's important is that here's what we're going to do about it includes a specific thing that they can do.
Actionable steps. Yeah, no, I like it.
So that they participate. Even something as simple as, for one of the greatest places to start for emergency preparation is to have your family fire plan and have your family fire drill a couple times a year, right? And even, if they're old enough to get out of the house on their own, right? Then the youngest kid who's old enough to get out of the house on their own, their job is to count noses at the rally point. So, they get out the house, they get there, and they know, and they're all ready because you've talked to them, you've drilled, you've practiced. They know that that's their job. And then they have a job, which keeps them from wandering off. It keeps them from being scared, or makes them scared less because they're not focused on their fear. They're focused on their job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a purpose, too, gives you confidence. And that builds. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Having a plan builds confidence, and confidence builds competence. And so that's the biggest part, whatever the thing is, and then in real time, maybe there's a blackout's another good example. You say to your 7-year-old who seems to me maybe freaking out a little bit, hey, we need the flashlights. Do you remember where the flashlights are? And usually they do because, not only have you shown them, but they've used them for backyard camping or to play flashlight tag, or they fetched them for you when you were doing some electrical work last month, right? Yeah. And you say, can you get the flashlights and meet me back here? And then they go do that. And, of course, again, they have a task, and the task helps them manage their fear.
Focus managing the fear is big. Yeah. And I think that's more and more. So many parents, in order to protect their kids, they shelter their kids. Yeah. And I think that's such a bigger shift in our culture. I mean, it's very possible that my generation, it was just neglect, but either way, it made you very confident and self-reliant. Yeah. Because you handled your own business, because mom and dad were either at work or, or having cocktail parties. I don't know what they do, but, and the kids were just on their own. But I think that gives you a lot of confidence, hey, I've done that. Or, my dad's like, yeah, you got to figure it out with your car or whatever. Well, you figure it out, Yeah. And I think the more skills that your kids develop and the more trust and responsibility you give them will help, build their confidence and that resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike made a good point about started his kids off with the go bags, and equipment, interacting with the equipment, helping you stock the first aid kit, helping you stock the go bags, and then walking through them about, okay, this is what you use for that, and then you watch the eyes, you watch the body language. Yeah. So this is a butterfly bandage. It's for when you need stitches, to put on the thing before you go to the hospital, and everybody at the table knows how to put one of these on, right? And then, the 7-year-old's like, yeah, absolutely, I know how to. Okay, let's hold on a second and let's. And you do that for all the equipment. Another really good opportunity is going camping, and making sure that the kids can use everything in the backpack. And that's another of my little hobby horses on prepping is our camping gear is our bug out bag.
Right.
It's got all the stuff. It's got the shelter. It's got the warmth. It's got the fire. It's got the water preparation. It's got a little bit of food. It's got some good cordage. It's got a knife. It's got a lighter. And, it doesn't have to be in a super cool black tactical Molly bag. Yeah. And then you just take the whole thing and put it in the trunk of your car. Save some space in the closet. And also it's with you if everything goes wrong when you're at work.
Exactly.
And you can, and then it's less of a go bag and more of a get home bag, but the equipment's the same. And then you don't have to buy another set of gear. Yeah. And the gear in that bag is gear that you're familiar with, because the last thing you want to do is try to figure out how to use your gear in the middle of a crisis.
Right. When you're under stress. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, getting the kids involved with that, with loading the camping gear. Every time you go camping, you have them learn and use. They're responsible for using a new piece of equipment, things like that.
Yeah. No, that's one of the things we always push with like get home bags or whatever. We have, we talk about a backpack all set up and whatever, but we actually encourage it to not like look tactical and prepared and whatever, because you don't want to be the only guy who looks like, hey, he has something we all probably want. You know, you don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy who, I'm just like you. We're all, and then you can choose what resources you bring to the table,
Yeah, we have a joke around here about, the Molin Labe bumper stickers you see on cars. Yeah. That's ancient Greek for there is a free handgun in this truck.
Exactly, right? Exactly. You don't want the NRA sticker on your vehicle or whatever. I think people have gone past the NRA these days, but yeah, exactly. Now, I have a feeling that 35-inch knobby tires may give away some of the clues that I'm trying to hide. But, exactly. The gun rack in the back might be an issue, but,
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. The OPSEC of your preparation is another topic. Another thing about equipment, and this is something our family started doing about 6 years ago, 7 years. Mm-hmm. Oh God, 8 years ago. And I really recommend families start doing this. So we all have our fire extinguishers in the house for one of the most common emergencies, which is some kind of small house fire.
Yeah.
And so in our house, the way ours is situated, we've got 3.
Okay.
And every year we do it just before 4th of July. We go buy, these are all $20 Home Depot fire. Right. We go buy one. We replace the oldest one in the house. We go into the backyard. We build a small campfire on the patio. And then from youngest to oldest, we all practice pull, aim, squeeze, spray.
Yep. Pass or whatever. Yeah.
Then we rebuild it, and the next person does it. We got goggles and things on.
Nice.
But then every member of the family practices once a year in how to use a fire extinguisher. So that, because again, we don't want to be trying to figure out how to use a fire extinguisher.
Exactly.
When, for example, your 14-year-old, this is many years ago, set a small fire in his bedroom.
Sure, why not, right?
Yeah. You don't want to be trying to, was it push, aspirate, right?
Right.
And then every year you just check out on that, and you're also rotating through your fire extinguishers so that they're all
which is nice too.
fully charged.
Checking that they're on it.
And it costs like $20 at Home Depot to get that fire extinguisher.
And it's a fun family adventure. It's a good time.
Yeah, the 6-year-olds absolutely love it.
So many people. And that's like, I work for a big company in a factory and whatever. And, people don't know. You don't do the training where you actually use a fire extinguisher. Oh, they're all here. Most people don't know. If they weren't a Boy Scout or had some kind of parent who was prepared or something, early on. In the Navy, I think we used to actually use them. Turns out when I was in the Navy, the ship used to catch on fire all the time. So we actually got firsthand practice all the time with them, usually a fire extinguisher level kind of fire, but we had our share. But yet people don't do that. They don't try it and they don't figure it out. Same thing, like they talk about pepper spray or whatever, they actually sell like homemade, like test ones that you can do where you're not going to go blind. And they're like $8. Like it's not a big deal. Oh, you carry it in your purse, but do you really know how to use it?
Or have you practiced deploying it where you're not just practicing spraying, but you're practicing digging in your purse for it under time pressure?
Right. Is it always in the same pocket, or are you trying to find it like they find their keys or whatever else in there, in the mystery bag, Yeah.
Yeah. That's why from self-defense standpoint, for people who don't train a lot, I really recommend the high lumen flashlights. Because your hand knows how to turn on a flashlight without thinking about it. And, the high lumen ones have been recorded as stunning bears.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because it can be bright and it can hurt a lot. And low light conditions, of course, are when people are most likely to attack.
Right.
Yeah, but the whole idea of making games and fun out of testing and using the equipment. Having your, a 7-year-old, don't try this with teenagers because, of course, they don't want nothing to do with any of us. But your 7-year-old is downright proud to be trusted by dad and mom to take point on setting up the tent.
Exactly.
And building the fire and playing with a fire extinguisher. so we can involve our kids by making it fun, making it a game, and having just the underlying message of, if something goes wrong, you now know how, and you know that mom and dad are on it.
Yeah.
And that's how we talk to them without scaring the bejesus out of them. We don't even shit hits the fan or anything like that. We can just, blackouts, house fires, breakdowns.
But again, I think somebody who's confident is going to handle any of these situations better than somebody who's terrified. And the more responsibility you give to them, I had read I like the prepper fiction novels. I find them entertaining. I like to play out scenarios, right?
Yeah.
And see different things in my head. And there was one that was like a single dad and his son. And before he had his son out dating, he's like, "Oh, you need to go to this medical training class on childbirth because there's no reason you should be out hanging out with a girl unless you know how to deliver a baby." I mean, obviously that's an extreme, right? But they had they had gone to all these, the CPR, they do it with the kids, all the different things. And so when basic things came up in life, adults who are like, "I don't know, what do I do?" This kid had 20 minutes of training, in a specific topic, but you understand the concepts and what's going on and what nobody wants you to be a doctor, but if you're familiar with the process and you get it, that's one more thing you're capable of handling, or dealing with a tourniquet or dealing with, whatever comes up in life. Like you said, using a fire extinguisher. That's a situation where people, my wife was very big on, before the kids drive, they all have to know how to change a tire, because you don't want to be stuck. And that was one of her big pushes. You don't want to be a girl and not know how to.
No, I caught myself screwing that up just a couple weeks ago. I was on a road trip to go do some teaching down in Denver, had a blowout. We just bought a new car like 3 months ago, and come out and realized, well, shit, I have no idea where the jack is in this vehicle. So I'm sitting there on the side of Highway 84 looking at YouTube going, where? And it turned out there was this whole storage compartment that I didn't know about in the vehicle. And here's me, the guy who teaches family safety and a little bit of prep, and then absolutely lost because I forgot to practice changing the tire on the new car.
Right. And that's like, I've had people say, "Hey, can you help me, jumpstart my car?" And it'd take me 10 minutes on a new car to find the battery. You're like, I don't know where they stuck it on this thing. Like it does change. You do have to be a little bit familiar with your stuff, but also when you understand how things work, you can figure out how to find it. And and there's hopefully an owner's manual in the glove box that takes care of those things too. But I don't know.
But it's good to know. Like I think I mentioned this when you were on my show that I had my Red Cross first from some job I had in college, and then I thought I had it, right? And then I went on and got recertified, and they'd added AEDs since the last time I've been certified.
And it's totally different.
No idea.
Everything. You know what? It used to be like 3 and 15, like 3 breaths and 15 compressions. And now it's like 30 compressions and 1 breath or no breath. And it all is changing all the time.
No, it's funny you mentioned apocalypse fiction, right? Yeah, my wife, who I married 8 years ago now, she's from Canada, and she actually works in publishing in apocalypse fiction. And what's funny is, American apocalypse fiction is often very gun centric.
Yes,
Canadian. In the apocalypse, Canadians go camping. Actually, out of one of those books where I first learned about shelter, water, fire, food. It's all about camping, wilderness survival.
Camping, and I imagine staying warm.
Yeah, that's a huge piece because of course, the environmental things. Good points about the things that we can teach and interact with our kids and our spouses about are very powerful, and they're not they're not as intimidating or as onerous or as hard on our finances as I think people think. And also we can fight that stereotype of the bunkers and the guns and the zombies.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. That's absolutely a good way to be. So I don't know. No, I appreciate it. Tell me the title of the book again.
It's Safest Family on the Block.
Okay.
Right here.
And
find it all kinds of
and
places.
What's the site again that we're going to go buy it? Where's the better one?
Bookshop.org is my favorite. And
All
for
right.
folks who turned in after that, it's an online bookstore that works like Amazon. Only local bookstores get their piece of the pie. Because, local bookstores are great places, and Amazon has, kind of threatened them for a long time. And you want to let those guys, you want to help those folks still exist.
Now it seems if they want to stay open, they have to be a coffee shop or a bar to keep people coming in the bookstore anymore.
Yeah.
It takes a lot anymore. So no, that's awesome. And your show now, where are they watching that? You have a YouTube channel and all that. What's that?
We have a YouTube channel, Safest Family on the Block, and we had a brief hiatus. We're starting a next season in June.
Okay.
And your episode's going to be on there. We've got Andy Murphy from Secure Dad's going to be on there. We've got a wilderness survival expert on there. And, we're at well over 100 episodes at this point. And each episode is a conversation between me and a subject matter expert like yourself. Our very first episode was with the guy. At the time, he was the paramedic in charge of medical response for San Francisco Airport. And the conversation I had with him was just, okay, what are the things that parents can stop doing or start doing so you have to treat kids less often? And it was funny because, he was a college roommate of mine. And neither of us can believe that we're in responsible positions at this point because we remember what we did in college.
Right.
But I just asked him, okay, so what are some things? So here's my idea for our interview. What are the things we can knock off and the things we can do? And he just rattled them off. It was clear that he'd seen like 12 things too damn many times.
That just
the first of which was strap our kids in, which shocked me that in 2020, which was when we interviewed,
right,
people are still driving around on the highway with their kids not strapped in.
Yeah, can't imagine, right? No, it's yeah.
Yeah.
And it keeps coming up. No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. So questions, concerns, email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Otherwise, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week. I appreciate it, Jason.
Create stories for life on a scenic Eclipse Mediterranean voyage. With Scenic, it's more than a journey of a lifetime. It's ultra-luxury cruising along elegant European Rivieras and idyllic Italian coastlines. It's being immersed in the history and culture of glamorous cities, towns, and villages. It's colorful architecture, landscapes, and regional cuisine. Scenic Eclipse, in a class of its own. Book your all-inclusive voyage now and save.